Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic, Cody Well, and today I have a trash voice, but we do have a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw the brand new release of Don't Worry Darling from Olivia Wilde. We also had the second weekend numbers for The Woman King. How did that movie fare? Also up against the third place movie this weekend, which is the re-release of Avatar, my favorite movie, as you all know. Man, oh man, this movie's trash. I want this franchise to die. But anyway, we have that and other things to talk about. I'm going to try and truncate this video, though, as much as possible for the sake of my own voice. And so, before we get any further, please make sure you smash that like button, that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey. And also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with that bell notification on. That way you know every time a video or live stream goes live on the channel. So the first movie to talk about is the brand new release, and that is Don't Worry Darling from Warner Brothers, Olivia Wilde. This movie has gotten a lot of attention, a lot of weird press, right? Positive press, negative press, and yet the movie still was able to make $19.2 million in its opening weekend. So a pretty strong start for a movie that only cost around $35 million to produce. This is putting that film right on track to basically, unless it has a massive drop off in the second weekend, to be able to make its money back. We'll of course have to wait for those numbers to come in and come out. But with the film not having really any major competition up until mid-October or so, we still have a few weeks or so until there's some bigger films set to come out. So Don't Worry Darling is in a pretty good position. Coming in at the number 2 spot is The Woman King. And though some people might say, oh man, Avatar, which came out so many years ago, almost beat The Woman King. And oh man, that per theater ratio. And yes, the per theater ratio for Avatar is a lot higher than that of The Woman King and Don't Worry Darling. All of those indeed are good things to talk about. However, one caveat that we have to understand to this is, one, just because the per theater ratio is higher doesn't necessarily mean that it would have made more money if it was in more theaters. The only reason why I say that is because if you have, again, more theaters, it means that that per theater number goes down. So you theoretically have a higher number, but it's not a guarantee of, one, how much higher that number would be, or two, whether it would be higher enough in the first place to make much of a difference. Again, that's just my own thought perspective on that, but I do think it is still a valid point to bring up. The other reason why I kind of want to shy away from that conversation, though, is because it takes away from the fact that The Woman King's 42% drop is a very strong hold. That is a number that is a very strong hold for a film, especially of its budget. Remember, this film costs around $50 million or so, and typically when you have these films that cost a little bit higher, normally you're seeing drops somewhere between 60 and 70%. But clearly, enough people are buying the propaganda surrounding this movie, because let's just be honest here, Hollywood is out in full support of this movie. You have a lot of these different a lot of these different places and a lot of these different companies and giant tech corporations, basically, that are fully supporting this movie through algorithms and all these things, trying to guide the conversation away from the actual history of the Dahomey tribe. And yet, with all of this, the film is still able to perform pretty well, get second place at the box office, but more importantly, versus its second place standing, is the fact that it made $11.1 million against its previous $19 million opening weekend. Again, only a 42% drop. That's a very strong number. And when you add into this the fact that the film has yet to release in some major countries, so it has yet to release in Taiwan, Mexico, Australia, Hong Kong. You also have major countries like Spain, the UK, Germany, France. All of these countries, this film has yet to release in. And so even though my own projections are showing that this film is likely to lose money, that's only with the current money that it has right now. Basically, my numbers and the way that my equations work is based upon a film having the biggest possible release, basically coming out in as many of the places it was set to come out in the very beginning. If a film comes out later on over time in other countries, that starts to play around with the numbers that I have. That's why sometimes you do see films that will be able to make more than 50% versus its first 2 weeks based on the charting that I do. Why certain films are able to, exceed any expectations. It's usually one of two reasons. Either one, because the film's actually getting a lot of positive word of mouth. It's, its weekly drop off is very, very small. So that's a big part of it. But then the other part of it is that it gets a release initially in a couple of countries, makes it look like it's going to make a certain amount of money, but then it gets a wider release in other countries, makes just enough in those countries, or is very successful in those countries and is able to make those things back. And so I want to caution anybody out there, if there's any videos that come out, I haven't really looked at my YouTube feed today, so I honestly don't know, but if there's any videos that come out saying The Woman King is going to lose money or it's a massive flop or anything like that, once again, 42% drop from week 1 to week 2 based on this budget is not a bad drop. That is pretty strong. And again, I think that it's a sign that people are buying the propaganda. I don't think it's a good thing because based off of everything we know about this movie and based on the fact of what we know about the history of the Dahomey tribe, which is very much being color-coded in a wide, candy-coded in a lot of ways, right, is being very much glossed over, is being worded in a certain way. Someone in the comment section tried to fight it and say, well, they actually mentioned it in the movie and it's one of the tensions they set up between the people in the movie. And I'm like, oh, so they make up fake drama within the movie between two characters that didn't actually exist in the history, because guess what? The people who were doing it had no problem, because that is what they thought was right at the time. They thought everything they were doing was good. They thought that, enslaving all of these people, right, from our own continent is fine. Selling them into slavery to get more guns and everything like that is totally fine. So please spare me the description and the attempt to try and really create propaganda to support this movie and to support the story that it's trying to tell. This movie has one objective and one objective only, and it's pretty much been stated directly by Viola Davis, who I think is a very talented actress, but she has very clearly stated that the main objective of this movie is to try to show that women of color can make money at the box office. Like that has been actually said by her in more or less words. And so I think that is the way that we need to look at an approach at this movie, because right now it is looking like it's going to do that. I don't think it deserves it based on the things that I've just previously said, but 42% drop, that tells me people are buying the propaganda. If we saw a massive, huge drop off, people said, screw this movie, we don't want to see it, this number would be a lot higher. But at 42%, that's not a terrible drop. Take into account all of the countries this film has yet to release in, you're looking at a situation where this film has a good chance of being able to reach its break-even point. Going into the further numbers as well, as you can see, again, Avatar did make $10 million at the number 3 spot. Again, pretty darn impressive for that film, even after so many years. This also is an early indication that there are still enough people that like Avatar, that like Pandora, that are buying everything that James Cameron is selling. I don't understand it, but they are. And this is telling me that the new Avatar coming out in December is going to be a massive hit. It's going to be a $1 billion plus film. I still don't think it's going to be as big as the first one, because I think a lot of people are going to say, yeah, you know what? The first one, maybe it had the spectacle. I only went to go see it because of everything that was said, but I don't care about the story, and I'm kind of done and over with it at this point. I wouldn't be surprised then, because of that, because there are more people like that now than there were, several years ago when the original film came out, where this movie then will not make nearly as much. But again, that's just my own thought on this. I want to actually see some data and some numbers before going any further. But this right now, early indication that there is still a strong enough presence. And that's why I think that I can pretty much this early say I think the film has a good chance of hitting $1 billion. All right, we also have the third weekend numbers here for Barbarian, which made $4.8 million, a 26% hold. This film now making some money to boot, so congratulations to them. Pearl continuing to add on to its own profits in its second week of release, only dropping 39%, very impressive there. The number 6 spot, See How They Run from Searchlight, $1.9 million, a 37% drop, so again, very strong, but we don't have the budget yet on that movie as of the recording of this video, and so therefore to say whether it's successful or not is hard to say. What I can say, and I'm very excited to be able to say this officially now, Bullet Train with $1.8 million domestically, another 29% hold, still very strong holds after 8 weeks, continuing also to make money internationally as well. This film has actually been able to surpass its break-even point and is now starting to make some net gain profits. Makes me very happy to say this film is a box office. I wouldn't say it's a hit by any means, because it's definitely not going to have a large profit margin ratio. We're looking at the film, capping out at maybe 10 to 15 million in net profit and gain by the end of its run at best. The fact is that it's still a good thing because it's a fun movie. It, like Top Gun Maverick, to me is one of the best films of this year as far as just entertainment value is concerned. And so I'm happy to see films like that make money. And so kudos to Sony Pictures for making a film that didn't end up losing tons of money. DC Lego Super Pets is seeing also very strong drops, but as you can see, it's starting to lose theaters. Its number for the weekend is starting to get a lot smaller, and it still has a ways to go for it to actually be able to break even. And so DC Lego Super Pets, I still think it's too far out for that movie. It's not seeing the similar trend as it was, as I was seeing with Bullet Train for me to be able to see any light at the end of that tunnel for this movie. But I do think that if it continues to do this well, it could put itself in a position where it could make some of that money back through subscriptions on HBO Max or through Blu-ray 4K releases, things like that. Top Gun Maverick in the top 9 still after 18 weeks of release, only dropping 30%. Again, insane numbers here. Another $1.5 million. Really, the question is, will this get to $1.5 billion or not? Let me know in the comment section what you think about that. And then Minions rounding out the top 10 with another $1 million. This film, well over $900 million at this point in time. Don't Worry Darling at $30 million worldwide based off of a $35 million budget means this film is in quite a good position. Again, whether or not it has a massive drop-off in the second weekend is going to be a major factor in the profitability for this movie, or the potential profitability for this movie. But right now, it is in a pretty good position. Woman King at $37.5 million. Again, the movie is right in the middle of the pack domestically based on projections. So maybe the word of mouth is having some impact on it. But as I said, it's not nearly as far off of a drop as I think it should have had, and I think that means more people are buying the propaganda than not, and taking that into account, that it's having strong drops domestically, and that it has yet to release in massive countries internationally, tells me that this film has a chance to make its money back. Avatar, yeah, $2.8 billion. Back in 2009, this film came out. The fact it still made another $10 million domestically. Again, that's why I think that the second film is going to make over $1 billion. I don't think it's getting anywhere close to the $2.8 billion of the first film, and that's even before you adjust these numbers for inflation. However, I do still think that you're not going to see nearly as high of a number there. Barbarian at $29.4 million, making some money now. Pearl continuing to add on to its money, and they've already announced that there's going to be a third film in this trilogy of films. We also see how they run, making $10.6 million. And so even though doing relatively well domestically, right, towards the top end of its range domestically with no budget, I can't say whether or not this film is in a good position or not. Bullet Train at $230.3 million puts it right again above its break-even point. We'll definitely be able to surpass $100 million by the end of this coming week, and so happy to see those numbers there. DC Lego Super Pets, again, has been projecting upward. As you can see, it's actually been climbing up and up and up towards the end of its release domestically, but its larger production budget keeps this film still in a position where it likely will lose money. Top Gun Maverick at $1.47 billion as of the recording of this video. 1.5 definitely in the discussion, at least at this point in time, but if it doesn't get it there, I'm not all that surprised if it doesn't, because 18 weeks of release at this point. Beast at $57.3 million. Update on this one. This one has basically been abandoned by the studio. It is in almost no screens at this point, so I can confirm that this movie then will indeed be a box office bust. Jurassic World Dominion. Oh man, that's right. It's our weekly installment of Did It Do It? No. According to the numbers, and I tried to find also correlating information on Box Office Mojo, and as of the recording of this video, this is the highest number I've seen for the film, $999.6 million. You can't make this stuff up. People, again, are going to try to say, who are still defending it, oh, well, it's basically $1 billion. If it ain't $1 billion, it ain't $1 billion. And again, I obviously do think it's going to happen, but I just think it's hilarious that this film continues to just come short of the number. And again, the movie sucks, and so I'm happy to see that. At this point, I could say I think I can pretty much guarantee it's going to make $1 billion by next weekend. But the fact that there were still articles going around, I saw people posting this on the Discord and stuff about the film already making $1 billion, I think is pretty hilarious. Before the actual numbers themselves come out, it is interesting nonetheless to see the numbers as they stand. I'm not saying that updated numbers for the actuals for the weekend may not push it over $1 billion, but anyway, it's just fun. It's fun to talk about that. All right, looking at the box office charts, because we like to do charts here on the channel. Don't Worry Darling's $30 million opening is pretty strong. Again, this film needs to make around $87.5 million to break even based off a $35 million budget. So $30 million opening, pretty strong. The week 2 numbers have now been out for The Woman King, and so I can project the film will make somewhere between $53 and $75 million. However, that's if the numbers that we had were all of its release dates. Because it is not, I think, personally, the film has a much better chance of ending somewhere between 75 and 100 million. Now, that means that this film has still a good chance of not being able to make its money back. Because let's say it does top out at $100 million. Okay, this film needs to make 125 worldwide to break even. So even with those extra, that extra money that I'm giving to it, that grace, those grace numbers that I'm giving to it, because it yet has not released in other countries, there is still a chance for this film to be a box office flop. What I'm just trying to say as we're recording this video is that even though right now my numbers and charting show it losing between 42 and 29, this is without considering how much money it will make from the international communities that it is yet to release in. So I still think the movie has a chance to make its money back. The question really ultimately is going to be whether or not it's able to do well in those countries and continue to have strong holds from week to week. Will people continue to buy the propaganda here in the States? I think they will, because typically people are stupid, unfortunately. And will they buy it overseas? I think typically when it comes to propaganda, unfortunately, and this is no insult to any of my international people, but it does seem that there are certain countries that I mentioned on that list that have a lot of people that are much more likely to buy propaganda, even from the United States, than not. And so, again, I think that the chance of the film being able to make its money back is still on the table at the very least. Pearl, again, it's making money. It's going to continue to make money. It's not going to be a massive number by the end of it. Again, you're looking at what? Ending around 10 to 15 million maybe, but the fact that the film is still over 2.4 million in the black, based off of $1 million budget, is pretty good to see. See how they run. Wish I had a box office budget for this movie. I don't, and so at this point, I can't say whether the film is a success or not. Let's see, other films that I was able to update as of this week. Invitation is pretty much stopped making money, but 4 million in the black is a pretty good showing for that movie. So hey, studio should be happy they were able to make some money back on that number. As I mentioned with Beast, because it has basically been abandoned, $19.6 million means that the film will probably end up there, right? Because it's not really in any theaters at this point in time. If I pull this back up, as you can see, it's only in 750 screens. It only made $400,000. So this film's chance of making money is pretty much done at this point, based on those numbers. Bullet Train, very happy to see this. Again, $230.3 million means the film is now at $3.2 million in the black. 50% higher, so it's doubled the amount of money it made in the first 2 weeks is what that number means. Makes me very, very happy to see that number there. And yeah, I hope that it makes as much money as it possibly can, because it is a movie I definitely plan to buy on 4K, and I think there's going to be a 4K steelbook of this movie. Can't wait to get that, because the film was a lot of fun. DC League of Super Pets, as I mentioned, it's holding very strong, and as you can see, it's more than doubled its first 2 weeks, so it's done very, very well. The problem is that it had a much higher budget than it probably should have had. I believe, if my memory serves me, it was around $90 million or so that the film cost to make. Yeah, $90 million budget means that the break-even point for the film is still quite high. And so because of that, this movie is still yet to break even, and I don't think it will at this point in time. Didn't really see any major updates for Nope, so I will update those if I can. So this film might have gotten closer to its break even, but as I mentioned previously, based on how much of a drop-off we saw from the previous week, it's looking like this movie might actually just miss out on it. But again, come back to the chart on ombreviews.com for an update on this later in the day. And then let's see, it's not on this list, but Top Gun Maverick, again, still massive profits. I think it's well over $615 million in net profit at this point, which is just darn impressive. But anyway, what are y'all's thoughts about this? Do you think, big story, of course, is Woman King. Do you think Woman King is going to make its money back? As I said, I think that you look at the strong domestic performance, again, as far as just basic percentage, it's a very strong hold for a movie like this, especially with the controversy surrounding it. I would have suspected it to be a much higher drop, but it seems that people are buying the propaganda. And to be honest, if you're looking at the country, if you're looking at the people who are running the country and everything like that, it really isn't all that surprising for propaganda to be bought, as it were. I will say one of the benefits of this movie is at least there are some people that are starting to learn about the actual history, not only of this tribe, but also about the history of slavery in Africa. I think that that's a good thing for people to know about. It's good for us to know the entirety of history and not just one part of it and not just a myopic view of it. We need to understand it in its full context. Instead of it always just being white Europeans evil, Americans evil, it needs to be, no, there are evil people on all sides of this, and we need to call out evil whenever it is that we possibly can. But let me know your thoughts about this, and really anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. Whew, my voice is tired. Anyway, please make sure you smash that like button, light that fire button, and honestly, you're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Sunday, and as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out for all of my September Patreon, Subscribe Star, and Locals members. Starting off with my Patreon members, Chris from the 80s, that's his YouTube channel, Garrett Searles, Hymir Irie Hymason, Jeff Toon, Jonathan Carney, Laura, the Modern Major General Story, Orange Eye Reviews, you can also find on YouTube by the same name, Rosetta Allen, YouTube's name is Eagle Rider, Stan Andrian, and Miss Martin Muses, and that is her YouTube channel. Thank y'all very much for supporting me over on Patreon. Also, for all my Subscribestar peeps, Matt317, that's his Twitch channel name, support him there. Storm Tracker, The R, Fast Reaction, Mr. Roy, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and the K-Man. Thank you, K-Man, as well, and you can find him at xtheboundaries.co, and thanks to all of my Subscribestar members. And lastly, to my Locals members, Locals has definitely been hopping a lot more recently. Shout out to Miss Minnesota hockey fan, how about a hockey player, UAB Mad Dog, UAB Mad Dog, Mike Jackson for the win, Brett D90, and the amazing lawyer Robert Barnes. Thank y'all for supporting me over on Locals. And an extra special shout out to newer members, Joey Horn, who is back once again, and the Empress of the Universe, Tina B. And if you want your name shouted out vocally at the end of every single live stream and video, make sure that you support me over on Patreon, Subscribestar, or Locals, and you can find out more information about it on those websites, and check out the top link in the video description below if you want to find out more about how to get that, access to podcasts that I do with John the Flickinger, and also how to be featured on the Chosen of Valhalla live stream, which I do once a month with my Chosen of Valhalla members, and it's always a lot of fun. Anyway, that's going to be it for me today. You guys all have an amazing rest of your day. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Beautiful people, and as always, God bless.